Nestled deep within the lush, towering pines of the quiet town of Pinecrest, Willow Lake was a hidden gem. Its crystal-clear waters shimmered under the sunlight, reflecting the vibrant greens of the surrounding forest. The lake was a sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world seemed to fade away. For Daniel Harper, it was more than just a body of water. It was his private retreat, his escape from the noise and stress of everyday life. Daniel had purchased the property 5 years ago, after years of saving and searching for the perfect place to call his own. The moment he laid eyes on Willow Lake, he knew it was meant to be his. The property spanned over 50 acres, with the lake at its heart, completely enclosed within his land. The deed was clear, the boundaries unmistakable. It was his, legally and rightfully. No public access, no shared ownership, just Daniel and his lake. For the first few years, life at Willow Lake was idyllic. Daniel spent his mornings fishing, his afternoons reading on the dock, and his evenings listening to the soothing sounds of nature. It was everything he had ever wanted. But peace, as he would soon learn, is a fragile thing. Pinecrest was a small, tight-knit community, and like many such communities, it was governed by a homeowners association, HOA. The HOA was led by a woman named Margaret Maggie Thompson, a self-proclaimed community leader with a penchant for control. Maggie was the kind of person who thrived on authority. She had been the president of the HOA for as long as anyone could remember, and she ruled the neighborhood with an iron fist. From the moment Daniel moved in, Maggie had her eyes on Willow Lake. She saw it as a potential asset for the community, a place for neighborhood gatherings, summer picnics, and holiday events. But Daniel was firm in his stance. The lake was private property, and he had no intention of sharing it. At first, Maggie's attempts to gain access to the lake were subtle. She would casually bring it up at HOA meetings, suggesting that it would be a wonderful addition to the community's amenities. Daniel always shut her down, politely but firmly. He had the deed, the property surveys, and the law on his side. Maggie, however, was not one to take no for an answer. As the years went by, Maggie's efforts to claim Willow Lake grew more aggressive. She began sending Daniel passive-aggressive letters, suggesting that he was being selfish by keeping such a beautiful resource to himself. She even went so far as to propose an easement, claiming that the lake had always been a part of the neighborhood's history and should be accessible to all. Daniel ignored her letters, but Maggie's determination only grew. She started spreading rumors among the neighbors, painting Daniel as a recluse who didn't care about the community. She even went so far as to suggest that the lake was a safety hazard, claiming that it needed to be managed by the HOA for the good of everyone. Then, one day, Daniel noticed something that made his blood boil. Strangers were walking along the shoreline of his lake, their laughter echoing across the water. When he confronted them, they told him that Maggie had given them permission to use the lake. She said it was fine as long as we were respectful, one of them said with a shrug. Furious, Daniel stormed over to Maggie's house. She greeted him with a smug smile, as if she had been expecting him. Daniel, calm down, she said, waving her hand dismissively. It's just water. What harm could it do to let people enjoy it? Daniel's jaw tightened. This is my property, Maggie. You have no right to invite people onto it. If I see anyone else trespassing, I won't hesitate to take legal action. Maggie's smile didn't waver. You're being so difficult, Daniel. It's just a little sharing. What's the harm in that? Daniel thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. One Saturday morning, as he stepped outside with his coffee, he was met with a sight that made his blood run cold. His private property had been transformed into a full-blown parking lot. Cars were lined up along the grassy edge of his land, blocking the path to the lake. A group of kids was splashing in the water, while their parents lounged on his dock as if they owned the place. Someone had even set up a barbecue station on his property. Daniel's hands clenched into fists as he strode toward the crowd. What the hell is going on here? He demanded, his voice sharp enough to cut through the laughter and chatter. One of the men, casually flipping burgers on the grill, looked up at him with a confused expression. Maggie said we could use the lake today for the HOA summer kickoff, he said. It's a community space, right? Daniel's vision blurred with rage. He turned and spotted Maggie in the middle of it all, sipping lemonade like some kind of benevolent queen granting her subjects a day of fun. When she noticed him, she didn't look worried. She looked annoyed, as if he were the one causing trouble. You can't just let people use my land. Daniel snapped, his voice rising. Maggie sighed, as if dealing with a petulant child. Oh, calm down, Daniel. This is what neighbors do. They share. It's not like you even use the lake all the time. That was it. That was the moment Daniel knew Maggie had gone too far. He had been patient, he had been reasonable, but this was full-blown trespassing. And if Maggie wanted to play dirty, he was more than happy to return the favor. Daniel took a deep breath, turned on his heel, and walked back into his house. He picked up his phone and dialed the number of a local towing company. When the dispatcher answered, Daniel calmly explained the situation. How many cars? The dispatcher asked. Daniel stepped back onto his porch, scanning the mess of vehicles littering his land. At least 15, he said. Possibly more. The dispatcher let out a low whistle. That's a big job. But yeah, if they're on your property without permission, we'll take care of it. Perfect. Daniel sat on his porch, sipping his coffee and watching as people laughed, grilled food, and splashed in his lake, completely oblivious to what was coming. He even set up his security cameras to catch everything, because he already knew Maggie would try to spin this into some dramatic sob story where she was the victim. 15 minutes later, the first tow truck arrived. Then another. And another. One by one, the trucks pulled into his driveway, flashing their bright hazard lights. The driver stepped out, checked Daniel's property deed to confirm he was the legal owner, and got to work. They moved swiftly, hooking up cars and hauling them off before anyone even noticed. The first few vehicles vanished without a hitch. Then a woman holding a margarita turned, saw a truck lifting her SUV, and screamed. That was when all hell broke loose. People dropped their drinks, bolted from their lawn chairs, and ran toward the tow trucks in pure panic. The guy manning the barbecue abandoned his grill, arms flailing as he tried to stop his minivan from getting dragged away. A woman in a sundress shrieked, Wait, that's my car. The tow truck driver didn't even blink. Ma'am, your vehicle is illegally parked on private property. You can pick it up from the impound lot. More shouting. More chaos. Maggie came running toward Daniel, her face red with fury. You're towing people? She screeched. Sure am, Daniel said, sipping his coffee. They're parked on my land. This is insane, Maggie yelled. You can't just. Daniel held up a hand, cutting her off. Actually, I can. It's my property. And since you told everyone they could park here, I hope you're ready to help them pay their towing fees. The color drained from Maggie's face. More trucks arrived, efficiently clearing out the cars while HOA members scrambled to save their vehicles. Some made it just in time, driving away in a frenzy. Others weren't so lucky. Then Maggie made her next mistake. She called the cops. Daniel stood there, arms crossed, watching as she frantically explained to the dispatcher that he was illegally towing people from his own land. He actually laughed. This woman was unbelievable. When the police finally showed up, the situation had escalated into complete madness. People were arguing with tow truck drivers, a few were demanding their cars back on the spot, and Maggie was in full meltdown mode, hands on her hips, furious as she waved her phone around. The officer looked at Daniel and asked, Sir, do you own this property? Yep. Are these vehicles trespassing? Yep. The officer turned to Maggie. Ma'am, this is private property. He has every legal right to remove unauthorized vehicles. Maggie's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. But the HOA has always. The officer held up a hand. This has nothing to do with the HOA. It's his land. You and your members have no legal right to be here. That was the moment the tide started to turn. People were angry, not at Daniel, but at Maggie. You told us we could park here, one guy snapped. I just paid $300 to get my car back, another woman shouted. Maggie stammered, trying to come up with an excuse, but the HOA members weren't buying it anymore. They realized they had been duped, and now they were paying the price, literally. It got worse for Maggie when one of the officers asked, Ma'am, did you organize this event? Well, because that means you're responsible for misleading these people onto private property. Daniel swore he saw the moment Maggie knew she was screwed. The cops didn't arrest her, but they did take a report, and Maggie had to personally explain to every single angry HOA member why their cars had vanished. It was glorious. The fallout from the Great Lake towing fiasco was nothing short of spectacular. The very next day, Maggie was in full damage control mode, trying to spin the entire thing as Daniel's fault. She sent out a mass email to the HOA, painting herself as the victim and claiming that Daniel had overreacted to a friendly neighborhood gathering. She even went so far as to call his actions aggressive and hostile toward community unity. But the problem for Maggie was that nobody was buying her nonsense anymore. The people who got towed were livid. Many of them had to cough up hundreds of dollars to get their vehicles back, and they were not about to let that slide. Within hours of her email, a chain of replies flooded the HOA message board. "Maggie, you told us we could park there. Why didn't you check first? So I'm out $350 because you lied? This is completely unacceptable. You need to fix this, Maggie." Her attempt at damage control had backfired spectacularly, and just when she thought things couldn't get worse, she received an official legal notice from Daniel's lawyer. He had decided to go on the offensive. The lawyer drafted a formal cease and desist letter, making it crystal clear that Maggie and the HOA had zero rights to his land. It cited property laws, detailed the numerous trespassing incidents, and firmly stated that any further attempts to claim access to Willow Lake would result in legal action. For good measure, Daniel also sent a copy to the HOA board. The board wasn't exactly a fan of Maggie to begin with. She had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way over the years with her power-hungry attitude. But now, she had cost dozens of HOA members real money and had nearly dragged the entire association into a lawsuit. At the next HOA meeting, things exploded. Maggie tried to regain control, waving off complaints and insisting it was all a misunderstanding. But people weren't having it. One homeowner stood up and publicly called for her removal, saying she had misled the entire neighborhood and exposed them to legal trouble. Another woman demanded to see the HOA's financial records, suspecting that Maggie had used HOA funds to print those fake lake access flyers she had handed out weeks earlier. The board scrambled to distance themselves from her. They assured the residents that the HOA was not involved in her stunt and that she had acted alone. Within an hour, a vote was called, and Maggie was officially removed as HOA president. It was one of the most satisfying moments of Daniel's life. With Maggie out of power, things changed fast. The HOA board sent Daniel a formal apology, not that he cared, and several residents personally reached out to do the same. A few even admitted that they had blindly followed Maggie's lead without ever questioning her claims about the lake. But Daniel wasn't about to let history repeat itself. The very next week, he made some upgrades to ensure that this nonsense never happened again. He had taller fences installed, complete with security cameras covering every entrance to the property. He placed bold, legally binding, no trespassing signs at every entry point, with explicit warnings that violators would be prosecuted. And just for fun, he added motion sensor lights to the dock area, so if anyone tried sneaking in for a midnight swim, they'd be lit up like a Christmas tree. Since then, not a single HOA member has dared set foot near Willow Lake. The funniest part? A few weeks later, Daniel ran into one of Maggie's old HOA allies at the grocery store. The man awkwardly admitted that Maggie had sold her house and moved away after losing her position. Apparently, she couldn't handle the humiliation of being dethroned. Good riddance. As Daniel sits by his peaceful, empty lake now, no cars, no trespassers, no chaos, he can't help but laugh. Maybe next time, instead of towing their cars, he'll just start charging them $500 per visit. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story on Store of Good Stories. If this story touched your heart or made you think, don't forget to hit like and share the video to spread this positive message to more people. And if this is your first time here, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of the meaningful stories we share every week. Your support is the biggest motivation for Store of Good Stories to keep bringing heartfelt and valuable stories to you. See you in the next video.